witness takes the stand in the trial of Patrick Frazee.
Investigators believe Patrick Frazee killed Kelsey Berreth in her townhome on Thanksgiving last year.
Day 2 of the murder trial for the man who allegedly killed his fiancée.
Today, day 7 of the trial, investigators revealed the moments they found
surveillance video of Kelsey Berreth and her 1-year-old daughter at a Woodland Park supermarket is the last anyone's seen of the 29-year-old mother.
If convicted, Frazee could face life in prison.
We can certainly sense that we are in the final days of this trial, and it is certainly...
Cripple Creek is a small town. Teller County is a small county.
We're up in like a minute.
They have never seen anything to this magnitude. In Cripple Creek, Ashley Franco, KKTV 11 News.
You've covered every second of this trial. What has the feeling been inside that courtroom?
It's been cold, it's been very heavy and chilling. During the first week, we learned about some of the evidence in the case. Crystal Lee, Patrick Frazee's ex-girlfriend, is set to be the prosecution's star witness.
Okay, it's 11:15, again on the 21st of December 2018. We're inside Kelsey's apartment with Crystal.
You are seeing what the jury saw. Remarkable evidence, the heart of the prosecution's case.
When you came in, what did you see?
When I first walked in, I saw blood all over the floor. I saw blood up the wall.
Who is Crystal Lee?
Crystal Lee is a rodeo queen from Idaho. She's very well known, and she's Patrick Frazee's ex-girlfriend. They'd known each other for over a decade. She's the bread and butter to this case.
That's Crystal Lee wearing a police jacket and hat.
Can you point to the area where you saw and clean blood up on the wall?
She admits to cleaning up the crime scene and tells the prosecution the whole entire story of what happened.
The spray was from here all the way.
She's the only person in the world that they have to possibly convict Patrick Frazee.
We did a deal with the devil. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts about it in this case.
This one?
But it's a deal that we made in order to move this case forward and to solve this crime. Sometimes in order to solve a case or move a case forward, we have to give a deal to the devil. That's exactly what we did here.
Did you say that you cleaned off some of the appliances?
I did. I wiped there was blood on the front of the dishwasher. There was blood on the front of the stove.
Crystal Lee was obviously the star witness for the prosecution, and she testified to things that the prosecution needed her to say in order to establish this case. I'm Aya Gruber. I'm a professor of law at University of Colorado Law School. I think there were doubts about Crystal Lee's testimony coming into it. Crystal Lee has trafficked in lies.
Crystal Lee is saying he has been planning on killing Kelsey, and he had called me multiple times about it. There's poison coffee. There's a baseball bat, scented candles, a blindfold, phones that are pinging all over Colorado and in Idaho.
I got to tell you, it's one of the most emotional trials I've ever been through, and I've been through a lot of trials. The roller coaster everybody was put on, there wasn't anybody on this team that at some point didn't have tears running down their face.
We just got word that a verdict has been reached in the case against Patrick Frazee.
Tell them try to take it. We're the only ones out here.
There's always a little bit of nervousness and question in the back of your mind.
Just hours ago, we were hearing closing statements, and now we have a verdict.
Patrick Frazee sits in this grim Cripple Creek, Colorado jail, put here by his former girlfriend, Crystal Lee.
There's blood on the wall here, there's blood on the wall here, and there was Blood right here.
In disturbing evidence that you will see throughout the program tonight, she tells her story about a crime scene cleanup.
I moved the couch. I wiped the couch off. There was blood behind the couch down the wall.
A plan to transport a body.
We brought the tote here. Okay. We unloaded the tote.
And her help in making sure there would be no trace of it left behind.
The things that were thrown into the fire by me were the belongings from Kelsey's house, the curtains, the pillows, the stuffed animals.
The tale begins when these haunting images were captured. A mother in the grocery store shopping with her baby. Thanksgiving Day 2018, the last time Kelsey Berreth was seen in public.
She's not the kind that runs off. This is completely out of character.
It was Cheryl Berreth who reported her 29-year-old daughter missing after trying to reach her for days.
Kelsey, we just want you home. Call us if you can, and we won't quit looking.
At that time, in early December, Woodland Park Police had not publicly named a suspect.
We are treating Kelsey's disappearance as a missing persons case at this time.
Can't eat and you can't sleep, and the stress won't end until we find her.
Usually it was us four all together all the time.
Ashley Cogburn, Amanda Smith, and Nicole Haywood had an unbreakable bond with Kelsey. They grew up together in Moses Lake, Washington.
From the pictures, she's gorgeous, obviously, and very put together. And so you might think that she's, this prissy girl, but she was not. She was raised on a hay farm and very much a tomboy.
Country girl.
Yeah, she's out there driving tractors and bucking bales.
In flying planes, she was a flight instructor.
She a good pilot?
Oh, yeah. She was really good.
She wasn't afraid to challenge the typical boundaries.
So, it wasn't a surprise when a Colorado cowboy named Patrick Frazee caught Kelsey's eye on a dating website in 2016.
He was like a country boy, and that's what she was used to. That's what she liked.
They started a long-distance relationship. Patrick Frazee lived on a 35-acre ranch in rural Florissant, Colorado.
These are 4 dogs. They'll be our dogs to train this fall and winter.
In this video, Patrick can be heard training cattle dogs.
Pepper, that'll do. Down.
He also shoed horses and groomed donkeys.
The black and white one is Flash.
Clint Klein has known Patrick for 7 years.
Patrick is the farrier for the donkeys. People call them horseshoers and all that, but our donkeys don't have shoes.
So he trims their feet?
He trims their feet. He gives them, as we call it, donkey manicures.
Klein says Patrick was quiet and dedicated to his work.
He's kind of laid back, kind of stays to himself. He had his ranch to take care of.
Eventually, Kelsey moved to Colorado from Washington State to be closer to Patrick, and they were expecting a child. Her mother, Cheryl, says they were engaged.
Does she have a dress yet?
No. I don't think she cared about the big wedding kind of thing. It was between them and God.
Even after their daughter Kaylee was born in October 2017, the couple still didn't live together but shared parenting duties.
He never came to see her, but she would, on her days off, she would go back and be with him.
Friends say Kelsey was struggling to balance the baby, her job, and a long commute. Her relationship with Patrick seemed strained.
She seemed to be kind of stressed out from the whole thing, that she couldn't make him happy.
Was Patrick emotionally abusive?
It appeared that way from what I saw, and it seemed like it was just knocking her spirit down.
Did Kelsey ever say he was physically abusive?
No.
Ashley says Kelsey once mentioned there may have been another woman in Patrick's life.
I think Kelsey had mentioned one time about an ex-girlfriend who still kind of wanted to be with Patrick. Kelsey wasn't worried about it. I don't know if it's because she knew she lived far away. Kelsey didn't seem all that worried about it.
After Kelsey was reported missing, police talked to Patrick. He told them that the day before Thanksgiving, Kelsey said she wanted to end their relationship. KKTV reporter Ashley Franco.
He said that Kelsey wanted to go their separate ways and things weren't working out between them. They wanted to split custody 50-50, and they were just not meshing anymore.
Patrick told police he and Kelsey met to exchange the baby on Thanksgiving Day. He also returned Kelsey's belongings.
A purse, keys to the car, keys to the townhome, and then a gun that Kelsey owned.
It was a gun, Patrick says, he had once taken from Kelsey for her own protection. Police say Patrick told them Kelsey struggled with depression, hinting that she may be suicidal.
When you hear that Patrick said Kelsey was unstable, that she was maybe suicidal,
No,
not at all.
It doesn't match up with Kelsey.
Police searched Kelsey's home, but turned up no signs of foul play. Then, Cheryl and her son went to the house to check it out.
There was a mat, like a rug of some sort in the bathroom, and it's gone. And she had also noticed that the refrigerator looked like it had been wiped down recently. You could see streaks. Later, her son is in the bathroom and notices blood on the base of the toilet.
And the alarms go off in their minds.
Alarms go off.
Kelsey's mother, Cheryl, alerted investigators who returned to the house. This time, they used chemicals to detect the presence of blood.
They found trace amounts of blood everywhere in the bathroom.
Do we know whose blood?
DNA results showed it was Kelsey's.
Investigators believed Kelsey had been murdered, but they needed more evidence. A closer look at Kelsey and her fiancé's cell phone activity Thanksgiving weekend would lead them to her suspected killer.
Patrick Frazee was taken into custody this morning in Florissant, Colorado, just after 7 o'clock this morning, Mountain Standard Time.
Nearly a month after Kelsey Berreth vanished, Woodland Park Police Chief Miles DeYoung made this grim announcement.
Today we arrested Patrick Frazee on charges of first-degree murder of Kelsey Berreth. As a reminder, Patrick Frazee is presumed innocent until proven guilty.
Patrick, what do you have to say?
Despite the murder charge, Kelsey's body had not been found.
As you can tell from the arrest, sadly, we do not believe Kelsey is still alive. Kelsey's daughter, Kaylee, is in protective custody and will be reunited with Kelsey's family.
Patrick Frazee entered a plea of not guilty, but from the beginning, investigators had questions about Patrick's story, starting with his initial claim that the day before Thanksgiving, Kelsey told him she wanted to break up and, quote, go their separate ways.
So this is Woodland Park?
This is Woodland Park.
Yet, there she was, shopping the next day for the family dinner.
You see her grab a cart and put Kaylee in the cart and then go off, and that's the last time publicly anyone had seen Kelsey Berreth.
What does she buy here at Safeway?
She buys ingredients for a sweet potato casserole.
Investigators wondered if Kelsey had broken up with Patrick, why would she send him this text? I bought some sweet potatoes in case you wanted sweet potato casserole. Kelsey didn't tell her mother she and Patrick were breaking up when she spoke with her Thanksgiving morning.
Did she sound normal? Did she sound...
Definitely. She sounded happy and...
Normal mom-daughter talk?
Yeah.
Another big question investigators had was when Patrick said he last saw Kelsey.
Patrick told officers that he hadn't seen her since Thanksgiving, November 22nd, when he exchanged their daughter, Kaylee Berreth.
In images from a neighbor's security camera on that Thanksgiving day, Patrick and Kelsey are seen at her door with a baby carrier after Kelsey returned from the store. You can see her holding a poinsettia. Later, Patrick is seen at that same location alone.
We don't know whether he's coming or going. He doesn't have Kaylee, and he's not with Kelsey. And then that's it.
University of Colorado law professor Aya Gruber has followed the case.
The critical question is what happened in between around 1:30, 1:45, and 3:30 when they get that picture of him.
Police say this is likely when Patrick killed her.
Investigators have recovered a number of items that make us suspicious that the crime did occur at Kelsey's residence.
Patrick told authorities he drove their daughter Kaylee to his ranch for Thanksgiving dinner. He said Kelsey wasn't with them, but investigators discovered that her cell phone was.
They pulled cell phone records and found that on Thanksgiving Day, November 22nd, all of a sudden, Kelsey's phone and Patrick's phone started traveling together, but Patrick and Kelsey were not together.
Investigators say Patrick took Kelsey's cell phone after he killed her as part of a scheme to cover his tracks. They believe he faked 19 calls between the two phones over Thanksgiving weekend and was sending texts between them, including this one from Kelsey's phone. "I'm going running. I'll call you guys when I get home." His response, "Okay, be safe."
The theory that the prosecution's going to put forward is that that was Patrick with her phone, and he's texting pretending to be Kelsey.
2 days after Thanksgiving, authorities believe Patrick concocted this conversation. "Are you awake? Sorry, I didn't hear my phone. Going to jump in the shower. I'll call you guys when I get out." Okay. Then investigators believe to keep up his ruse that Kelsey wanted the breakup, Patrick sent this message. "If this is truly what you want, I'll respect your wishes and give you space." On Sunday, 3 days after Thanksgiving, there was a bizarre development that would send this case in a very different direction. Phone records show while Patrick's cell stayed near his ranch, Kelsey's phone was on the move, heading west out of Colorado.
There was a text from Kelsey's phone to her supervisor at DOS Aviation saying, "I won't be at work." So people had thought maybe they heard from Kelsey.
The next text from Kelsey's phone said, "Do you even love me?" That text pinged off a cell phone tower 800 miles away.
Reports are correct that Kelsey's phone gave a location near Gooding, Idaho on November 25th.
When that came out, I think everyone was just shocked.
And where's Kelsey?
And where's Kelsey? No one knows where Kelsey is.
So how did her phone end up in Idaho? This woman may have the answer. It was startling news when investigators revealed that 3 days after Kelsey Berreth was last seen, her cell phone had pinged in Gooding, Idaho, 800 miles from her home.
Tonight, we have new information about a 32-year-old Twin Falls woman that may have helped Patrick Frazee cover up the disappearance and alleged murder of his fiancée, Kelsey Berreth.
At the time of Kelsey's disappearance, phone records show that Patrick was in touch with this woman, Crystal Kenny Lee. Crystal was a nurse and avid horsewoman who grew up here.
This is Crystal's world.
KMVT news director and weekend cowboy, Cade Atwood.
We work hard to be able to do this on the weekends. Crystal and her family are a big part of the rodeo community, a very prominent family.
Talk horses, and you're speaking her love language, you know.
Michelle Stein is Crystal's best friend.
Horses are her life. She loves horses.
Take a look at this!
And in Idaho, where rodeo rules, Crystal was royalty. In 2008, she was crowned Queen of the Magic Valley Rodeo.
She was so loved.
Laura Stutzman has known Crystal since she was a teenager.
Crystal was so kind with everybody that It was just so difficult to turn her down in any way.
Crystal had a reputation of getting what she wanted?
No, I wouldn't say it was a reputation of getting what she wanted. Crystal worked so hard at everything she did to try to do everything completely correct.
Authorities believed that it was Crystal who traveled to Idaho with Kelsey's phone. But when the FBI made their initial call to Crystal, she said she had no idea who Kelsey Berreth was. She also denied knowing Patrick Frazee. Then she changed her story.
They asked her, when was the last time you talked to him? And she said, I don't know, I'd have to look at my phone. And then says, oh, in the last month. And investigators are thinking, okay, but we already know that your phone has called his phone multiple times in the last few weeks. She says, I don't have a personal relationship with Patrick Frazee. I've gone to Colorado and looked at a few of his horses, and that's the extent of our relationship.
She lies.
She lies.
Turns out, Crystal Lee and Patrick Frazee had a long history. They met after high school. Then, 8 months before Kelsey disappeared, Crystal and Patrick's relationship heated up. Crystal was recently divorced with 2 children.
She had been out here multiple times to see him, and it was a type of affair.
What did Crystal say about Patrick? Was she in love with him?
I think she was, to a point.
During the investigation, the FBI got a tip that Michelle had explosive information about the case. She says Crystal called and confided in her about a disturbing conversation she and Patrick had a month before Kelsey disappeared.
She was very, very upset, very distraught. She had told me that he had asked her to take care of his baby mama.
And you took that to mean, or she took that to mean?
So I was like, well, I was in shock at first because who says that? Nobody says that. So I was like, wait, what? And she said, yeah, he asked me if I would kill the mother of his baby.
I mean, what are you thinking at that point?
I was just in shock and disbelief.
What was Crystal's tone when she was telling you this?
She was bawling. She was crying. She was extremely upset and scared.
Michelle says she asked Crystal why Patrick wanted to kill Kelsey.
He had told her it was because she wanted to take him back to court to get custody of the baby. And he was in fear that she was going to harm the baby.
Investigators found no proof Kelsey had harmed her daughter, but did find evidence that Patrick had planned to challenge Kelsey for custody and believe that may have been his motive for murder. Michelle says she pushed Crystal to call the police.
I kept telling her, I think you need to call and tell somebody. See, you gotta understand, I'm trusting her to do the right thing.
But I think, Michelle, people watching will say, call the police. Say, you need to talk to my friend. Someone's asking her to kill someone.
You're right. Okay, of course the viewers are gonna think that.
But do you have regret?
Of course I regret it. I regret it every day. Oh my God, I would do anything to have stopped that somehow.
Kelsey had been gone about a month before Michelle talked to the FBI. And when the FBI went back at Crystal a second time, she too was ready to talk.
I think at that point she kind of knows I have to come clean.
But first, Crystal wanted a deal. In exchange for her testimony against Patrick, she agreed to plead guilty to evidence tampering. She admitted to getting rid of the gun, to tossing Kelsey's keys in a canyon, and destroying her phone.
It's a tampering with evidence charge, which is a minor charge compared to murder or, accessory to murder or attempted murder.
She only faces, at max, 3 years in prison.
This is a pretty good deal that she gets.
What Crystal revealed to investigators would become the center of the prosecution's case against Patrick Frazee.
When I first walked in, I saw blood all over the floor. I saw blood up the wall.
When Crystal Lee finally started talking, she didn't stop for 4.5 hours. Her story was stunning. She claimed Patrick tried to get her to kill Kelsey 3 different times.
The first idea was to get a caramel macchiato from Starbucks, Kelsey's favorite drink, and put poison in it.
2 months before Kelsey went missing, Crystal says she drove 12 hours from Idaho to this Starbucks near Kelsey's home in Colorado.
Hi, welcome to Starbucks. What can I get started for you today?
Crystal, a nurse, told investigators she suggested the perfect potion, a lethal dose of Ambien and Valium.
This is the drink.
That is the drink Crystal Lee had ordered to put poison in to give to Kelsey Berreth.
So Crystal brings this Starbucks caramel macchiato right here.
Waits in the alleyway, walks up to Kelsey's door, knocks on the door, and
Kelsey opens it?
Kelsey opens it, tells Kelsey this elaborate story. She says, "I'm new to the neighborhood. Someone had told me that you had helped get my dogs out of trouble." And Kelsey says, "No, I didn't do that."
Does Kelsey take the coffee?
Allegedly, Kelsey takes the coffee inside and closes the door. And from there, we don't know what Kelsey does with the coffee.
But Crystal says she couldn't do it. She didn't poison the coffee. And when Patrick found out, he was angry.
He was furious. He was not happy that she didn't go through with it.
He would play head games with her. A lot.
Crystal's best friend, Michelle Stein.
He just had a way of manipulating her into doing things.
After Crystal said she couldn't go through with the poison plan, she told investigators Patrick came up with a different idea.
He says, I have a metal pipe that I'll leave outside my property that you can come pick up. And I want you to go wait for Kelsey at her townhome. And when she comes, hit her on the back of the head.
The way Crystal tells it, she drove to Kelsey's house with that metal pipe, but didn't attack her and drove back to Idaho. A week later, she says Patrick called with a new murder plan.
Once again, Crystal drove from Idaho to Kelsey's Colorado townhouse.
Crystal claims she waited for Kelsey outside her home, this time with an aluminum baseball bat. But just like her earlier attempts, she says she chickened out.
It's just hard to believe these stories. They seem outlandish and wild.
Phone records show Patrick called Crystal in Idaho around 4:30 on Thanksgiving Day. Crystal said he told her, "You need to get out here now. You got a mess to clean up."
Crystal says that she can't come out that same day, but will come out a few days later. She's in Idaho, loads up the car with cleaning supplies, bleach, hair nets, gloves, trash bags.
She basically brought the equivalent of a hazmat suit and every sort of cleaning product that one might see in one of those TV shows about how to clean up a crime scene.
2 days later, on Saturday morning, Crystal says she drove 800 miles to Patrick's ranch to pick up a set of Kelsey's keys he left for her outside. Then she says she drove to Kelsey's home.
Crystal tells authorities she opens the door and the scene is horrific. There's blood everywhere.
According to Crystal, Kelsey's body was not inside.
And then spends, 3 to 4 hours cleaning and scrubbing the murder scene. She takes some of the things that she couldn't clean and puts them into trash bags and loads them in the back of the car she was driving.
Crystal claims Patrick was back at his ranch during the cleanup.
There was a point in time when Patrick Frazee had told Crystal Lee, when you go to clean up her townhome, there is possibly a tooth somewhere.
Crystal said she found that tooth and put it in a trash bag. Crystal told investigators after the cleanup she met with Patrick. She described to them how he said he lured Kelsey to her death. Crystal claims Patrick invited his fiancée to play a guessing game with candles.
She says that he takes a sweater from Kelsey's room and blindfolds her with the sweater and has candles sitting out in front of Kelsey and is telling Kelsey to guess the scent of each candle.
During her interview with investigators, Crystal said Patrick told her while baby Kaylee was in another room, he took a baseball bat and, quote, he went to swinging. After killing Kelsey with that baseball bat on Thanksgiving Day, Crystal says Patrick told her he put her body in a black tote. This surveillance image shows Patrick at an ATM earlier that day with a black tote in his truck. Crystal went with investigators to Patrick's ranch. She told them that she and Patrick went there together, and she watched him burn that tote.
He poured gasoline in the bucket and pitched it into the fire.
I believe yesterday you said that you also collected wood and put into the burn pit?
Yes, I did.
Police later examined the spot where they believe Kelsey's body was burned. Crystal also went with investigators to Kelsey's home. She's wearing that police jacket and hat. The floorboards had been removed for testing.
And can you point, if you remember, where the tooth was? Around the tooth, what was there, if anything?
Blood.
All right.
There was blood on the chairs. There's blood on this chair. There's blood on the table. There's blood on the Hobby Lobby bag that was sitting there.
She pointed out where she claims she intentionally left blood for them to find.
Right there.
On December 21st, 2018, Patrick was arrested at his ranch and charged with Kelsey's murder.
This is a case without a body. This is a case without a lot of physical evidence. So what we mainly have connecting Patrick Frazee to an incredibly brutal and violent crime is Crystal Lee's testimony.
Crystal, who had cut that deal with prosecutors, seemed shaken when she appeared in court after she turned herself in to authorities.
The Crystal I knew could do no wrong, but the Crystal that has done the things that came out of her mouth is somebody I don't know.
And that leaves Laura Stutzman with one question: why?
Almost a year after Kelsey Berreth's disappearance, there was a long line to get a seat in the courtroom at Patrick Frazee's murder trial.
I think a lot of people that knew Patrick, they don't think that the candle story adds up.
Frazee's friend, Clint Klein, was there almost every day.
I don't know of any guys that would have thought of going out and buying candles and having their girlfriend be blindfolded and then smell the candles.
You think that had to be a woman's idea?
I think so.
Frazee was driven from the jail in a black SUV. He entered the courthouse through this white tent, out of sight from the media. Security was tight. No cameras in the courtroom. District Attorney Dan May.
I got to tell you, it's one of the most emotional trials I've ever been through, and I've been through a lot of trials in my career.
Prosecutor Beth Reed painted a picture of Patrick Frazee.
Very charming, very manipulative, and controlling, all traits consistent with being a sociopath.
Ashley Franco summed up the defense case. No body, no murder weapon, and no clear motive.
They had said, Patrick wasn't involved. There's no evidence to show he was involved. And Crystal Lee had already lied to law enforcement, so she's the one to blame for this.
On day 4, the prosecution's star witness, Crystal Lee, took the stand. Her credibility was on the line.
I don't think we would have known what happened to Kelsey without Crystal Lee.
I started picking up things that were blood splattered.
For 2 days, prosecutor Jennifer Veman asked Lee to describe Frazee's plan to kill Kelsey Berreth. They bolstered their case with surveillance videos and photos. This one shows the black tote in the back of Frazee's truck that Lee says he would use to dispose of her body.
When you came in, what did you see?
blood all over the floor. I saw blood up the wall, saw blood on the lift wall.
Most disturbing, prosecutors played that video of Lee inside Kelsey's home, showing investigators how she cleaned up the crime scene.
Did you say, correct me if I'm wrong, did you say that you cleaned off some of the appliances?
I did. I wiped there was blood on the front of the dishwasher. There was blood on the front of the stove. There was, that cinnamon roll pan had blood on the tinfoil.
They had pulled up the floorboards where they found Kelsey's blood. They showed video of a hay barn where Lee says Frazee hid Kelsey's body in that tote overnight. A cadaver dog alerted to the area. This is a surveillance image of Frazee at a gas station. Lee says he was buying gas to start a fire.
We brought the tote here.
Okay.
We unloaded the tote.
Okay.
Kelsey's body was moved to Frazee's ranch.
Were you present when he started the fire?
Yes, I was.
Okay.
This is the video that shows how Lee says she helped Frazee burn Kelsey's body in that black tote.
What about the accelerant?
Gas.
Okay.
And burned evidence, including Kaylee's toys and Kelsey's blood-stained Bible.
Do you remember what the books were by just...
One of them was her, I would imagine it was a Bible.
Experts say a human female tooth fragment was recovered from Frazee's ranch near the burn site, but there wasn't enough DNA to determine a profile. At the end of her testimony, she told the jury Kelsey's chilling last words, "Please stop." But he didn't.
He keeps beating her and beating her and beating her. The jury needed to hear that. They needed to hear how brutal this was, how uncaring he was, how senseless this was.
Why would Lee help Frazee? She claimed she feared for herself and her children.
She was in love with Patrick Frazee and had been for a long time. As the trial went on and we saw that dark side of Patrick Frazee that Crystal saw, that Kelsey saw, I think you can understand some of that fear. I don't know that we'll ever understand entirely why she did what she did. It's fairly inexplicable.
Perhaps the most shocking testimony came from a surprise prosecution witness.
Your last witness, I think jaws dropped when he started testifying. Tell me about him.
We didn't know about him.
Prosecutor Beth Reed says the surprise witness was an inmate at the same jail where Patrick Frazee was being held.
He actually had started calling our office while we were in the middle of trial.
The former inmate had watched a 48 Hours episode on Kelsey Berreth's murder. Turns out, he says, Frazee gave him a hit list. Some of the names handwritten on paper towels he was instructed to flush.
Describe to me what was in the 16 notes passed between Patrick and the former inmate.
Well, they were requests that a certain number of witnesses needed to disappear. But it was very specific as to Crystal Lee, graphic descriptions of what needed to happen to Crystal Lee. He described putting a bullet in her head.
Also on Frazee's hit list, Crystal Lee's best friend, Michelle Stein, and Kelsey's mother, Cheryl Berreth.
What does that say about Patrick Frazee?
It says that Patrick will do whatever he wants to get whatever he wants.
The defense called no witnesses. Frazee chose not to testify. The case went to the jury. After 3.5 hours of deliberations, a verdict.
A verdict is in this 11 breaking news alert.
The jury says they unanimously found Patrick Frazee guilty of first-degree murder.
Frazee was found guilty of first-degree murder, sentenced to life in prison plus 156 years.
Do you think if Patrick hadn't involved Crystal, he would have gotten away with Kelsey's murder?
Yes, I do. I think it's very possible he would have gotten away with that. Involving Crystal was a stupid plan. The whole plan was stupid. But he wanted Crystal Lee to pin it on.
As for Crystal Lee, she's facing a maximum of up to 3 years in prison.
I think
A lot of our viewers are probably thinking, Crystal Lee, given what she's admitted to, got a really good deal.
She did. And it's not right, and I'm not going to try to justify it in any way. It's unfortunately a part of my profession that sometimes in order to solve a case, we have to give a deal to the devil. That's exactly what we did here.
If you could sentence Crystal Lee, what would it be?
A heck of a lot more time than 3 years. She could have saved Kelsey so many times over so many months, and it's totally inexcusable.
Is this justice for Kelsey and Kaylee? Can there ever be justice?
Justice in this case? Kelsey would be sitting here talking to you, not us. Excuse me. So we can certainly seek a certain amount of justice, but not the justice that this case deserves.
The week before Frank was murdered, we were at a go-kart race. Frank would be running all these cars, and it got so competitive, and they loved it.
He couldn't quit.
A real competitor.
Yeah, the quit wasn't in him.
Frank Spencer he was like a big teddy bear.
If he knew you, he'd cut a leg off, get up, and ask if you need anything else.
He was one of a kind. Great person, outstanding friend.
I've talked to at least 5 of Frank's friends who've all told me they were Frank's best friend. I think that speaks volumes about who Frank Spencer was.
Peter, this is the Frank Spencer residence, the scene of the murder. Really unchanged since 2012.
Can you take me inside?
Sure, let's go. Frank Spencer's body was right here on these tiles.
Oh my. Is that remnants of his blood here?
It is.
We didn't have to ask each other. We knew. We knew it was Maria. We didn't know who else might have been involved, but we knew it was her.
Maria Spencer, to me, is a classic femme fatale. An attractive woman, a seductress, who, when a man becomes involved with her, this is gonna end poorly.
How would I describe her? As a terrorist.
You keep f***ing with me, because I'm not f***ing with you. I mean it, Spencer. I'm f***ing done.
It was a campaign of terror. Frank is afraid of Maria, and he's also afraid of Rocco Franklin.
Rocco Franklin's Maria Spencer's father. Everybody knew who Rocco was.
I'm a street guy. Rocco. Everybody calls me Rocco.
What was the reputation of Rocco, the mythology of Rocco in the community?
He was a hitman. He would do things for people. He had some type of association with the mob.
I'm not a violent guy.
No, I don't mind breaking somebody's legs, but they deserve it.
This was not simply a murder case.
Frank told me where it was going to happen was going to be at his house.
She said, you're going to get shot in the head. And she told him that.
I think she was an emotionally troubled woman who did not want to be divorced.
If you could picture somebody screaming, help, 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 and everybody's just standing around watching, that's what the situation was like.
Was he a dead man walking?
Absolutely. In his opinion, yes.
You don't win unless I let you in. Do you understand? You don't win, Spencer.
How could this all happen? If you made this into a movie tomorrow, nobody'd believe it actually happened.
I was working on the go-karts. We're right in the middle of a big series. We were trying to win.
It was July 3rd, 2012, in the once easygoing town of Bloomsburg, Pennsylvania. A Tuesday. Joe Yodock, Frank Spencer's lifelong friend, hadn't heard from him since Saturday.
And I had been texting him because we had issues we had to work on with the go-karts.
Joe and Frank raced go-karts together for years with their kids. And so that morning, Joe went looking to find his missing buddy.
I'll never forget it. I was pulling down the driveway and I thought, man, I hope I don't find him dead.
When Joe found Frank lying on the floor, it took him a moment to process what he was seeing.
And he'd had this look of peace, calmness, that he hadn't had in a long time. I stepped over his legs and I noticed what looked like dried blood in his ear. Then I realized what happened, and that he wasn't alive.
This loss of somebody you knew from the time you were in kindergarten. Can you put that in words?
Oh, nope.
It was a tragedy, but not a mystery for Frank's loved ones. Most suspected Maria Spencer, Frank's former wife, who had officially become his ex-wife just 3 weeks before the murder. Maria didn't want the divorce, and the proceedings had been drawn out and contentious. Very contentious.
You could tell there was just venom. Didn't matter who was there, she'd fly in screaming, slamming car doors.
Ironically, Maria's passion was one of the things that had attracted Frank to her in the first place.
He liked the crazy.
Frank's friend, Paul Siciliano.
You know, in the beginning when they were together, it was fun for him, you know, because he did have that kind of wild side to him.
Frank and Maria eloped in 1997. Soon they had a son, Cyrus, and then a daughter, Frankie.
Well, the kids were his biggest priority. Everything he did was about the kids.
When Frank's father retired, he took over the family business, a junkyard, located behind Frank's childhood home. Frank's friend and Joe's wife, Katie Yodock.
He knew everybody. I mean, everybody in the town knew Frank Spencer.
Frank's friends say Maria didn't seem to warm to family life the way Frank had.
Frank was disappointed that she wasn't taking that much of an interest in the kids.
The marriage eventually began to crumble, and Frank filed for divorce in 2006. Police were called several times for domestic disputes. Despite this, Frank wanted to keep the kids in one home. His friend, Ron Romig.
Frank said that kids shouldn't be punished by having to go to their mother's house or their father's house. This is your house. So this week I live here. Then that week I'll leave, and that the kids should try to have as stable a life as they possibly can.
But friends say Maria was anything but stable. In 2008, she was arrested after a scuffle with Frank's mother at her daughter's school. She was charged with disorderly conduct, harassment, and child endangerment for allegedly not buckling her daughter into the car. Tom Leipold prosecuted the case when he was an assistant DA, but didn't feel he could prove child endangerment.
And so I agreed to dismiss that charge in exchange for the plea to the 2 other offenses.
Maria pleaded guilty and had to pay a $600 fine. But the judgment only seemed to fuel Maria's rage. She repeatedly threatened to kill Frank, sometimes in front of other people. Frank had been reporting those threats to local police for years.
The issue is that Frank and Maria relationship was volatile.
Hemlock Township Police Officer Scott Tross says Frank and Maria would fight, but often reconcile. He says he wrote up Maria's threats, but says Frank didn't want it pursued.
He just wanted things documented for his sake in case of something happened to him.
By 2009, the Spencers' divorce battle was 3 years along and still far from over. But emotionally, Frank was moving on.
Did the two of you hit it off right away?
We did. Frank and I both admit that we were both smitten at the same time when meeting each other.
Julie Dent met Frank through mutual friends, and things soon turned serious. Maria did not take this news well, especially when she heard Julie had spent time with the children.
Hey, Julie, it's Maria Spencer. You can go out with Frank, but do not, make no mistake about it, watch my children.
The situation escalated further. That summer, Maria's father, Rocco Franklin, who had a reputation as a tough guy, was released from prison after serving 5 years on fraud charges. This was not good news to Frank.
He started changing his habits when her father was out of jail because he was very concerned about something happening to him.
Did he feel like he was being hunted?
Yes.
A few months after Rocco's release, there was a break-in at Frank's junkyard. Nothing of value was taken, but a pile of business records was stolen. Documents that could potentially help Maria prove Frank's income in the divorce.
The day after the apparent break-in, I received a phone call from Maria Spencer saying that she had found a trash bag on the front porch of her mother's house with all these business records in it.
Remember Tom Leipold, the man who once prosecuted Maria? He was now serving as Maria's divorce attorney, even though he was still an assistant DA. It may sound bizarre, but it is allowed in Pennsylvania for part-time prosecutors.
In terms of appearances, do you understand why, for some, it's troubling that you took on Maria Spencer because she'd had all these run-ins with the law? Doesn't that compromise you?
It did not compromise me. I had no contact and no involvement with any criminal matter involving Frank Spencer or Maria Spencer after I undertook to represent her in the divorce. None.
Many in town suspected Maria and Rocco had been involved in the burglary. Sergeant Traw interviewed Maria and gathered evidence, which he took to the DA, Tom Leipold's boss.
I consulted with the district attorney at that time, and then I reviewed the entire case with him, and he determined that there was not enough to pursue criminal charges against Maria Spencer.
Maria gave the documents to her lawyer, and they were ultimately returned to Frank. But the burglary was left unsolved.
To this day, I don't understand it. It's like we're in some weird universe.
Frank's friends were beginning to wonder if Maria would ever be stopped, especially when they saw what happened next.
I guess when the house burned down, I was like, this isn't a game anymore.
Hey, Julie, it's Maria Spencer. Do me a favor. Don't watch my children. Do not get between me and Frank by doing my children. Do you understand me?
By the winter of 2010, the war of the Spencers continued, and so did the threats from Maria.
I've never been threatened. I really chalked it up to just a bully, that she was just running her mouth, as she so often did.
Maria continued to harass Frank, too, often making veiled threats about her father.
Hey, Frank, it's Maria. He's an old man. He's got funny ways. So I thought I'd let you know because I care about you, not because I wanted to frighten you.
Despite the threats, Julie and Frank tried to live a normal life. That January, they planned a romantic trip to the Caribbean.
And was Maria aware that you were about to take a vacation?
Unfortunately, yes.
Maria started texting Julie about Frank. He says he loves me and didn't want to disappoint you on your only vacation this year. And do you want to know if he loves you or me? Then the night before they were supposed to leave, she asked Frank to dinner to talk about custody. And dinner turned into a room for the night at a hotel.
She lured him away.
That night, Frank's mother's home, where he lived off and on, went up in flames. Frank's friends rushed to the scene, including his divorce attorney, Joel Wiest.
Nobody could find Frank. We were all very upset, thinking Frank was in the fire.
Fortunately, the house was empty that night, except for the kid's dog, who died in the fire. Frank's friend Dirk Reed says as they were standing by the smoldering ruins, Maria drove up, smiling.
Drives up the driveway, smirk on her face, turned around and left, and that was that.
Frank arrived soon after Maria left and told the state police fire marshal that he was certain Maria and her father had set the fire. But the fire marshal said there was no way to find evidence of arson because the structure was destroyed. The fire was designated undetermined.
Frank was extremely angry that they could not figure out why or how the fire started.
Frank was done with just wanting things documented. He wanted an arrest.
Frank and I approached everybody we could think of in the law enforcement community. I still to this day do not know if there was ever an investigation.
Sergeant Traw from the Hemlock Township Police started a case file and spoke to Maria, but says because of the fire marshal's conclusion, there was little else he could do.
I did have a strong suspicion that it was arson, but I'm not an expert. So when he determined that, that's what I have to go with.
After the fire, Maria seemed to taunt Frank in a text. Karma is a wonderful thing. You destroyed my life. I feel a lot better since your whole life went up in the fire. Makes it fair.
And I can hear her saying it. It was just a text. I can hear it.
Maria followed up with another menacing text about Julie. I will make her lose her job, her home, and you.
Did Frank read that to you?
He did. He was very distraught by it.
As time went on, Maria's threats grew more bold and more public. At a kids' soccer game, Maria screamed in Julie's face that her house was next. A few months later, Julie was home alone, asleep.
It was when I heard the breaking of glass. As I came around to the top of the stairs, as I was about to round the corner, I was greeted by a fireball, literally a fireball coming up the stairs.
What do you do?
Nothing else I could do but to open a window and go out onto the porch roof.
Julie jumped from her second-story porch roof and survived, shaken but uninjured.
I lost everything.
And do you believe that the sole intent of this was to burn a house down, or was it to kill you?
I do believe it also had the component of ridding me from the life, yes, of Frank Spencer.
Julie lived in a different county, and she and Frank were hoping for a better outcome this time. But another state police fire marshal at the scene that night said he couldn't find evidence of what started the fire.
At this point, even I wasn't accepting it, let alone Frank.
Julie's home insurance sent a fire inspector out the next morning, and Joel Wiest says he showed him what they'd found here by this window.
There was a car jack right here, laying on the ground. It was a scissor jack that would lift the car.
What would a jack be doing here?
It's heavy, it's steel. It was used to break that window in.
And the investigator noticed a path through the weeds by the house.
There was a milk jug, a gallon container, and there was an unused road flare lying next to it.
An igniter.
An igniter, which said to the investigator, these are the makings of a firebomb.
A firebomb. The state police fire marshal came back out to the scene.
And they used their apparatus to determine accelerants, and there was gasoline all over those steps.
This time, the fire was ruled an arson. Frank and Julie told the fire marshal they were certain Maria was involved and shared her prior threats. But once again, no one was charged. In the fall of 2010, Frank and Julie tried separating briefly and in desperation told their story to a local paper. A year and a half later, there was something else in the newspaper, an announcement that Frank and Maria were finally divorced.
Had the two of you talked about spending the rest of your lives together, perhaps?
We did. Yes.
But that would never happen. The day after that divorce notice was published, Frank Spencer was dead.
Let's open this a little bit farther. Oh my. This is his home right here?
Yes, it is. Right here on the left. This is the murder scene.
Pennsylvania State Police Corporal Sean Williams was assigned to lead the murder investigation the day Frank Spencer's body was found.
On that July morning, as you approached the front door here, what did you see?
Peter, there was a lot of blood right here in front of this doorway. The blood had striations in it, like as though it had been pushed with a push broom, attempt at cleanup.
Frank's house has been frozen in time in the years since his murder in 2012.
You can see some of our chemical testing, Frank Spencer's blood spattered against this frame and door.
Can you get us inside?
Sure. Frank Spencer's body was right here on these tiles. Frank's head was behind this doorway and his arms were outreached above his head. He was laying on his back.
Investigators found their next clue in the blood around Frank's body, right here where this section of the floor was removed.
The forensic service unit did their collection of evidence. They found that there were footwear impressions on this tile in blood.
Footprints?
Yes.
Right here?
Yes. We sent it to the FBI for analysis, and it came back that it was a Dr. Scholl's model, Escape brand, size 11 sneaker.
The same size and brand of shoe that Maria's father, Rocco, was known to wear.
What other evidence did you find here in the house?
I can show you if you come on in. This is the main living room of Frank Spencer's home. We come back into the kitchen here. The forensic services unit, they found a glove, a yellow cleaning glove, right about this position right here. You expect to see a rubber glove in the kitchen, but not laying in the middle of the floor. And the mate for the rubber glove was actually right inside the sink here.
When the gloves were tested, Maria's DNA was found inside. Friends say she hadn't lived in that house in over a year.
It wasn't a door slam, close the file, and make an arrest, but it definitely helped us along the way.
Detective Williams had now apparently linked Maria and her father Rocco to the murder scene. But that could only take Williams so far.
I mean, we work in our business with fact. So just because everybody in town was saying, I think Maria did this, I think her father did this, we couldn't just assume that.
But soon, investigators uncovered more evidence of two suspects. Frank had been shot by two different guns, and forensic analysis determined that the first bullet struck Frank when he was outside the front door, and it came from a rifle.
A bullet passed through his bicep and went into his chest cavity.
And was that a fatal shot, do you believe?
Yes.
Since a rifle is typically a long-distance weapon, police expanded their search into the woods.
Peter, right up here on this ridge across from the house, you'll see a Y in a tree and there's a big base.
This one right up here?
Yes. So that is the location where we found a spent casing, a live casing, both 30-06 rounds, and there was a soft gun case for a long rifle located as well.
Now, this killing took place in July, height of summer, so I take it this whole hillside would be covered with leaves, bushes. Would Frank have seen an attacker up there?
I wouldn't think so.
So this was a classic ambush.
Yes.
After that first shot, Williams says Frank was dragged inside and shot again, this time with a handgun at close range.
Then why a second bullet?
It could be a motivation of hatred. It could be a message sent to Frank Spencer. That shot meant something to someone that put it there.
Detective Williams had another mystery to solve. Where was Frank's pickup truck?
We have a victim inside the house, but there was no vehicle there for the victim.
Investigators checked security cameras along the roads near Frank's house, and they found images of Frank's truck driving away from his house just minutes after they calculated he had been murdered. But who was inside the truck?
I sent it to the United States Secret Service, and it was still just too far away. It wasn't like they could zoom in, look through the window and see who was there.
Frank's truck was eventually found in Sunbury, Pennsylvania, 27 miles from Frank's house and just 5 miles from where Maria was living at the time. Frank's missing truck had led police toward Maria's home, but there was something else missing from Frank's that day that would lead them toward Rocco's.
And then all of a sudden,
there was a dog appeared.
right over here is a Weimaranean. You good? What do you think? Does it look all right?
Yeah,
all right.
So.
Frank and Barbara Pinto run a wedding venue in Dauphin, Pennsylvania, 72 miles from where Frank Spencer was killed. On the day of the murder, they were setting up for a wedding when an uninvited guest wandered in.
Beautiful dog just comes sashaying in. I said, well, whose dog is this? And nobody knew whose dog it was.
It was Frank's dog, Muttley, adopted after his kid's dog was killed in that fire.
So, did Muttley look exhausted like it had taken some 70-mile journey to get here?
No, you could tell he was somebody's dog. He was very well taken care of.
Very well taken care of.
Detective Williams realized that someone had driven Muttley to Dauphin, and that person must have been at Frank's house at the time of the murder.
And how many killers would take a dog with them unless they knew that dog?
I wouldn't think too many.
Williams learned that Rocco lived in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and the wedding venue is right along the road from Frank's house to Rocco's.
Rocco's cell phone is on that direct route that same day.
Williams theorizes that Maria had asked Rocco to take Muttley for the kids' sake, and that Muttley had run off accidentally when Rocco stopped along the way. It was now 2 months after Frank's murder, and Williams wanted to talk to his two main suspects. Maria refused, but to Williams' surprise, Rocco agreed.
Which still blows my mind why he decided to talk to us. However, I think Rocco likes that cat and mouse part of an investigation.
Rocco did give Williams an alibi.
What did he say?
Said I never left Harrisburg. I couldn't believe it because I know from his cell phone that he had traveled twice.
Rocco told police a preposterous story, saying that while he had never liked Frank, he was actually at Frank's house the day before the murder, without Maria helping tidy up.
I said, well, what kind of cleaning were you doing? And he said, well, I was, folding laundry and cleaning up with the push broom.
That's the same push broom that was used to clean Frank's blood off the porch. Even more far-fetched, Rocco said Frank had let him test drive his truck that day, and that when he offered to buy it, Frank suggested they wrestle for it.
Basically what he's saying is, I touched Frank Spencer, I touched the truck, and I touched that push broom.
It sounds like he's trying to create a scenario, if you find my DNA in any of these places, this is why.
Absolutely.
Run! Touchdown!
Around the same time Rocco was talking to Williams, Frank's friend Dirk saw Maria in the stands at a high school football game.
So I just sat down beside her and I said, I just want to let you know, don't worry about me around your kids. I said, I'm never going to say anything to disrespect you or Frank around your kids. And she looked at me and goes, that's why you're still alive, Reed. And I just looked at her and said, tell your dad I said hi. And she went off.
Like many of Frank's friends, Dirk suspected Rocco had helped Maria murder Frank.
And we were basically almost nose to nose. And I'm going, why? You took him away from not just your kids, from everybody.
What did she say to that, though? I mean, did she say, I didn't kill him?
Oh, no. What she said was, the last thing he saw before he died was me.
It was a wretched moment for Dirk, but a huge piece of evidence for the case.
She's putting herself at a homicide scene. If she saw someone take their last breath, she's saying she was there.
By that autumn, Williams was working with prosecutor Tony Foray, the senior deputy attorney general for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania.
I think it was horrible that what Frank went through.
Foray was handling the prosecution because the county DA was now Tom Leipold, Maria's former divorce attorney, and he had recused himself from the case. Foray was aghast when he learned Frank had been reporting death threats for years, both before and after the fires in 2010.
In the state of Pennsylvania, is making a death threat to someone, is that a crime?
Yes, that would be a terroristic threat.
Even when Frank did ask police to investigate some of the threats he reported, Maria was never brought in for an interview or charged with making terroristic threats.
If you get away with terroristic threats, and then if you get away with a burglary, and you get away with a fire, and you get away with a blatant attempt to murder a girlfriend in a fire, the only thing left is murder.
Local police officer Scott Traw.
People in this town who believe that you and other members of the Hemlock Township Police Department were just not doing your job. You were not properly investigating these threats and complaints. You say what?
That's not true. Every incident was thoroughly investigated. If they were serious in nature, the Columbia County District Attorney was consulted, and he would determine at that time if somebody would get arrested or not arrested.
The county district attorney during most of the time leading up to Frank's murder was Gary Norton. He says he never knew about Maria's threatening voicemails and texts.
As district attorney, I only know what the police tell me.
And Norton says it was usually up to police to make arrests, not the DA.
But when I was DA, 95 to 99% of the arrests that were made without consultation with the DA. The police had that power and exercised that power.
Julie Dent's fire was not in Traw or Norton's district. And Norton says he didn't ignore Frank's mother's fire or the theft of Frank's business records. He says he was following the law.
Is there an arson, and can we prove arson? No. Is there a burglary? No, because Frank Spencer had no proof that it was Maria who entered the premises. Before a prosecutor can ethically bring a charge, there has to be evidence or proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
But prosecutor Tony Foray felt he could prove the earlier crimes and Frank's murder. It took time to gather evidence, and in 2013, Foray convened a grand jury. This time, both suspects agreed to talk.
And there was no interrupting Maria. So as soon as she took a breath, I would ask a question. Did you ever threaten to kill Frank Spencer? Her answer would be absolutely not. Check. 1 count of perjury. Did you ever threaten Julie Dent? Absolutely not. Check.
And so Foray charged Maria with 12 counts of perjury, more than a dozen other charges, and most importantly, Frank Spencer's murder. In July 2014, Williams went to arrest her.
And that's when I told her she was under arrest for the murder of Frank Spencer. She immediately began to say, "Oh my God, oh my God, oh my God."
The warrant for Rocco's arrest was issued the same day, but Rocco was nowhere to be found. It had been 2 years since Frank Spencer's murder, and Maria Spencer was finally under arrest.
It was like you lifted a weight. Like there's 1,000 pounds on your back.
But her father, Rocco, had skipped town the year before, fleeing right after he finished his grand jury testimony.
Within like 36 hours, Rocco Franklin had boarded a plane to Colombia, South America.
And are you hot on his trail?
Not at that point.
That's because Rocco had an 11-month head start. But once Williams had an arrest warrant and a little help from the State Department, he found him.
He was only 4 blocks away from the United States Embassy in Buenos Aires, Argentina. I couldn't believe that it was sort of that easy.
Sort of was the operative term. Within weeks, Rocco was arrested by Argentinian police, but he fought extradition. And so in the fall of 2015, Maria Spencer went on trial for Frank's murder alone. Prosecutor Tony Foray.
The totality of what went on is, I think, both the strength of the case and also the horror of the case.
Foray had Maria's DNA at the crime scene, the truck found close to her home, and her history of death threats. Maria's defense was to blame her own father.
Clearly, the defense strategy was this was all Rocco, Rocco, Rocco. He's the bad guy. It was all him.
Cameras were not allowed inside the trial. One by one, Frank's friends took the stand.
How many of you were called upon to testify at trial?
All of us.
All of us.
They told the jury about the fires, Maria's admission that she was at the crime scene, and the years of harassment. Julie Dent testified about an especially disturbing threat.
So what would she say to Frank?
One specific that I remember plain as day is that she would cut off both of his hands and dip him into hot tar to cauterize him so that he would never be able to hold his children again.
The trial lasted 9 days. As the jury began its deliberation, Frank's friends were worried.
You're just thinking, yeah, like,
oh my God,
things never seem to go our way, you know.
I was scared.
8 hours later, the jury had reached a verdict.
I look down. I never look at the jury because I don't want to react. I'm waiting, which seems like an eternity, and then it's guilty, 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 guilty.
Maria was found guilty on all counts for murdering Frank Spencer and for the 2 arsons, the burglary, 12 counts of perjury, conspiracy, and terroristic threats.
Merry Christmas.
She was sentenced to life without parole plus 50 years.
That was it.
That was it.
Yep.
That's it for all of us.
Like, oh my
Thank
gosh.
you.
Thank God.
It took another year and a half, but in 2017, Williams was finally able to bring Rocco back to stand trial.
I never done anything. Did you kill Mr. Spencer? Of course not. Don't talk ridiculous.
Maria had argued Rocco killed Frank alone, but Rocco wasn't following that script.
Come on, I got no beef with Frank Spencer. If I had a beef, I'd have broke his face a long time ago.
But Rocco, who spoke to us from the county jail, doesn't appear to be holding a grudge against Maria for trying to blame it all on him.
Maria never hurt nobody. What they did to that girl's outrageous.
Rocco says he's innocent of murder and the rest of it.
But they got no proof. What proof they had? Show me one piece of evidence. One eyewitness, one fingerprint, one anything.
Prosecutor Foray says he has plenty of evidence, from the shoe print in Frank's blood.
Footprints.
Yes.
To Rocco's ridiculous story.
How are you feeling, Rocco?
I'm doing fine. How you doing?
Putting himself at Frank's before the murder. And of course, the arrival of Muttley at that wedding.
Like, I'm that dumb that I'm gonna steal a guy I'm supposed to whack, take his dog, and leave it 10 miles from my house? Come on, that doesn't even sound right.
In the autumn of 2018, after a 4-day trial, Rocco Franklin was convicted of Frank's murder and for the burglary and the arson at Frank's mother's house. He was sentenced to life plus 45 years.
I mean, this has been a long, drawn-out affair, and it never needed to be what we're going through now.
Dirk's wife, Dina Reed.
After the first fire, she should have been in prison. Frank should still be here.
Sergeant Tross says he did what he could.
Frank's dead, I understand that. But I wouldn't do anything, and our department wouldn't do anything differently than we did.
Tony Foray has called what Frank experienced an epic failure of law enforcement.
Did anyone stop and look at the totality of everything that was going on and do something significant in terms of arresting either Maria or her father, Rocco? The answer is no.
Well, there's not a crime in the Pennsylvania Crimes Code that's called the totality of the circumstances make you look really guilty.
Former DA Gary Norton.
You have to analyze these things case by case and ask yourself, can an arrest be made, and can I, in good faith, secure a conviction beyond a reasonable doubt? And the answer was yes where we prosecuted her, and no when we did not prosecute her. I reacted as best I could in the situation, and my conscience is clear. I don't have any regrets as to what I did.
Out in front of the courthouse, where Gary Norton now serves as a judge and Maria's former divorce lawyer, Tom Leipold, serves as the county DA, is a fundraising brick Frank Spencer purchased years ago. He dedicated it to his children.
And there's not a day that goes by that I don't think about him. And I still can't figure out why it happened.
Here we are. So we're at Olive Branch, the church that I grew up in for 3 years. This is the house that I lived in. This is probably not a door I want to open. I don't know if I could handle being in there, knowing what happened. My name is Jessie. My hair is pink. I decided to change my hair. I also changed my name to Jessie. Jessica, I no longer wanted that name because she was a very sad, lonely, angry little girl, and I just didn't want that anymore. When I was a young child, I lived with my mom and my dad. And then there was me, the oldest, my middle sister, Janelle, and then there was my little sister, Jolene. My dad died when I was 5 years old. After my dad had died, my mom married Bob Pelly, and Bob had become a minister. Because my stepdad was the minister of the church, we lived in the parsonage. Bob's kids were older than me and my sisters. My first impression of Jeff was he was very tall, skinny, crazy big hair. And Jackie, she was a little more quiet, reserved. My sister Janelle and I had a best friend, Stephanie Fagan. She was like one of the family.
We played in the backyard. We ran through the cornfields. It was typical country girl stuff. The Pelly family, through my eyes, seemed normal, for the most part.
In April 1989, I was 9 years old. My whole world was shattered. Jeff was planning to go to the prom that weekend. Jackie was at a church camp. I had planned to go to a friend's house. So I ended up going to the sleepover by myself for the whole weekend.
My Sunday routine was we would usually arrive at church between 9 and 9:15. I would go over to the Pelly's because Dawn usually had breakfast made, eggs, bacon, whatever we wanted. So I ran over there. But the door was locked. I was confused. The doors were never locked. And I went running back to the church and I said, I don't know, they must all be sleeping. At this point in time, I think the whole congregation was there. They had a master key. They went and scoped it out themselves. And they came back and said, everybody needs to run to the altar and pray. I was super confused.
We drove up and I saw lots of people in the parking lot. And there were cop cars everywhere. There was yellow crime tape. A police officer came up to the van and asked my friend's mom to get out. And I could see them talking and I could see the tears just start streaming down her face.
Dawn, Janelle, and who shot and killed the Pelly family?
So she came around and told me that my whole family was gone.
The brutal murder of the Pelly high-powered shotgun wasn't home. The brutal murder of the Pelly family
shot to death in their home Sunday morning.
It thrust a small town into the national spotlight.
I had just found out that my whole family was gone. I had just lost everything. I pretty much became an orphan in a day.
Lakeville, Indiana was never the same for me, and it was never the same for anybody, to be honest with you, that lived there. It was hard on the whole community.
This happy picture of the Pelly family is how most people who knew the Pellys probably want to remember them.
because that family was loved dearly and nobody could understand it.
Jesse and I, we were 3 years apart in age. It wasn't too hard for me to try to put myself into her shoes and to know what it must be like to lose everyone. The funeral was on May 3rd, 1989, in the church where Bob Pelly preached every Sunday, next to the house where they were murdered. It was standing room only. There was media everywhere, news anchors running around with cameras pointed at us as we walked in.
Also at the funeral were Jesse's stepsister Jackie and stepbrother Jeff. Both had not been home the weekend of the murders.
I remember seeing Jackie visibly emotionally upset and shaken. Jeff, he was just flat and distant. It's like he was there, but he wasn't there.
The only thing I remember about my family's funeral was the caskets. I don't remember who all was there. I couldn't tell you what I was doing. I just remember the 4 caskets.
We were toward the front of the church in a pew. And all at once, the chords to a piano began to play the song Amazing Grace. And I just remember being so devastated to realize the reason that the caskets were closed is because of the horrific way that they had died.
No one should have seen what we saw that morning. We walked in through the garage door, and upstairs, Robert Pelly was in the hallway, his glasses next to him. And he had 2 gunshots on his body. And then we went downstairs and saw Dawn, Jonelle, and Jolene. And that was what really put a face to this crime.
To see the young girls in that position the way they were with their mothers, trying to protect them, was just something that was etched in my mind forever. They were all shot in the head. It was devastating. It stuck with me my whole life. I mean, 30 years later, I can still see, if I close my eyes, the 3 people in the basement.
As a detective, I saw the worst of the worst that morning, but we had a job to do. So immediately started talking about suspects. It did not look like a burglary. It did not look like a home invasion.
The police spoke to all of the surviving members of the Pelly family, including Jeff Pelly.
So do you know who killed your mother and father? Or your father and...
No, I really don't. I don't know who would want to.
I didn't know who had done it or who they thought had done it. It was like a hush-hush thing with me. In my own mind, I had to come up with something, so I thought my stepdad had killed my mom and my 2 sisters and then killed himself. He was not very nice to me, spanked me a lot, so I thought, at 9 that he could have been capable of that.
But police had dismissed that possibility almost immediately.
After seeing the extent of injuries of Bob Pelly and no murder weapon or no weapon laying around him, I ruled the suicide part out in my mind.
A month after the funeral, relatives sent Jessie away to camp with her friend Stephanie in an effort to restore some normalcy to her life.
Ended up to not be normal. Jessica was a very changed person after that. When I say the million-mile stare, like, she had it a lot. It was almost as if she was there, but she wasn't there. When I look at those pictures, it's just so weird and strange to me because we both have smiles on our faces, but those little girls weren't right. Those little girls were hurting.
After camp, Jessie says her relatives thought it was best for her to start over.
They didn't want her to communicate with the people that she had shared this tragedy with.
After the murders, we really didn't have a close relationship. My stepbrother and my stepsister and I, they went with family members on their dad's side, and I went with a family member on my mom's side. I ended up in Michigan because I went and stayed with my grandfather. They just wanted me to forget and move on. It's like they wanted me to be in this bubble to protect me, but it wasn't really protecting me. It was isolating me and hurting me.
I had sent letters, and I was told not to send any more letters. I just would sit at night and think to myself, I can't imagine what she's going through.
I ended up running away, and then they placed me in a foster home. I didn't really have a place to call my own. I felt like a drifter. I didn't know where I was gonna stay. I felt like I didn't belong anywhere.
As time passed and Jessie tried to regain her footing, the investigation dragged on without any arrests.
At the age of 13, I did try and take control of my life, and I actually pushed down all the feelings that I was feeling. I was happy and outgoing and had friends and didn't think about the past.
But 5 years after the murder of her family, someone from her past life came calling.
My stepbrother Jeff, he did call me when I was 15 and asked me to come down to Florida to visit him. When I went to visit him, he did have a really good job with a computer business. He had a wife, Kim, and had his own house, so he was doing pretty good. And the first thing that he asked me was, "Who do you think did it?" So I looked at him and said, "I think your dad did it," and then it was dropped.
Unbeknownst to Jessie, police had been focusing on someone else from the very beginning.
Looking back on that time visiting Jeff, it could have gone way worse than it did.
After the Pellys were gone and after they were buried,
here I am at the cemetery.
There was no more laughing. There was no more running. There was no more playing.
Just gonna grab my stuff out of the trunk.
There was just no more of anything.
And they're right over here.
When I was 16, I got my driver's license. And the first place I went was to the cemetery.
I would just sit and talk to them.
It was a huge way to cope with the loss.
And then I started kind of tending their graves, just making sure that they were clean and scrubbed and that there wasn't any moss and stuff on them. My mind just wonders why. I mean, they were so young.
For years, Stephanie Fagan grieved the loss of the murdered Pelly family, but also the loss of Jessie.
She was gone. I couldn't figure out why they wouldn't just let me, keep in contact with her. When I was a teenager, I did start doing research about the murders, and that's when it became kind of an obsession for me to find her.
Every time I came out, I was always thinking, I'll run into her someday. If I just come out here enough, she'll be here.
I did not realize anybody was out there looking for me. I pretty much thought everybody forgot about me and had moved on with their lives because it wasn't their family that they lost.
In 1998, when she was 18, Jessie tried to move on as well.
The first chance that I got to purchase my own home, I did. I used some of the inheritance to purchase it. I had not had a home since I was 9. It was an amazing feeling. I felt like I belonged there, that I had a place.
Jessie finally had a home, and a family would soon follow.
When I first met Tyson, it was love at first sight for him. Me, it was not. I was with someone else. So when we reconnected a couple years later, we just started hanging out, and ever since then, we've been together. I have 2 children. When my children were younger, they did know that I had a family and that they were gone. I did not go into detail. I did not really give them any explanation on what had happened. They just knew they were gone.
But in 2002, 13 years after the murders, keeping her past buried would become more difficult.
There was a knock on my door, and there were 2 detectives standing there.
They told her the case was being reopened.
They said, well, we're here to talk about, your family's murder case, and we just want to know who you think did it. When I told them it was my stepfather, they looked at each other and then, looked at me and said, well, there's no way it could have been him. And then that's when they asked me, well, who do you think could have done it? And in that moment, Jeff came to my mind. My older stepbrother, Jeff, liked to do things that just scared me. He was so quick to getting angry, and he would use his fists, he would fight, and they said, yep, that's exactly who we think did it. I got a pit in my stomach, and then they started telling me a little bit about the case.
Reverend Robert Pelly, his wife, and their 2 youngest children were found shot to death in their home Sunday morning.
I know there was a lot of angst in that family between him and his dad. I know a situation where Bob punched him one time. I think the neighbors saw a lot of that same thing as well.
Just weeks before the murders, Center had handled a case in which Jeff Pelly had burglarized a home.
Bob Pelly grounded Jeff for the burglary case. He could not go to the prom without his dad taking him. He couldn't go to dinner before the prom. He couldn't go to the after prom. The embarrassment of his dad driving him, not having to do any of the other activities, was crushing to Jeff Pelly.
Conducting an interview with Robert Jeffrey Pelly.
I interviewed Jeff with his grandparents May the 1st, 1989.
Did you have anything to do with it?
No, I didn't. Me and my father didn't get along sometimes. Sometimes I'd be really upset with him. But we always worked things out.
But investigators didn't believe him.
When you're talking about the death of your family, you think, every once in a while he'd tear up or he'd cry. He never did any of that.
The main evidence against Jeff was the timeline. The Pellys were last seen alive shortly before police believe Jeff left for prom.
Who else could have done it? Who else would have done it? Who else had the motive? I believe he killed his family and then was able to go to the prom.
Yet back in 1989, the case against Jeff was thin.
We didn't have any forensic evidence. We didn't find a murder weapon, no eyewitnesses. We had circumstantial evidence and the timeline. Very tough case to prove, very tough case to prosecute.
The prosecutor's office chose not to file charges on Jeff Pelly.
At the time, the prosecutor did not think we had enough. To my mind, I thought we had enough.
But 13 years after the slaughter of the Pelly family, a new prosecutor thought there was enough evidence. Jeff Pelly was arrested and charged with 4 counts of murder.
When I heard Jeff was arrested, I was just waiting until the trial to see, what was going to happen. I was scared that he was going to get out, come after me. When he's angry, he's not a nice person. When I came back to Indiana for the trial, it was like coming back a stranger.
17 years after the murder of her family, Jessie returned to the place she once called home.
I felt like it had never been my home. I couldn't remember a lot about it. I couldn't remember a lot about the past.
On Monday, a jury got its first good look at a man most people in St. Joe County haven't seen for a long time, Jeff Pelly.
And when I went to trial, people were asking who I was. And that's when it hit me that, wow, I really was lost.
A jury of 7 men and 5 women will hear the case against Jeff Pelly.
I was scared to see him. I was scared to have all these memories come back up.
I did hope to have a reunion with Jessica at the trial. My anxiety was very high because I thought, okay, here's my chance. I'm gonna be able to see her because we're all gonna be in the same courtroom, and that never happened.
That's because Stephanie was a witness, and only in court the one day she testified.
I was not allowed to see her. I was not allowed to contact her.
Tuesday, lawyers laid out their cases to the jury in opening statements.
This was a totally circumstantial evidence case. There was a very, very small window when the family could have been murdered. It was very clear the only person who could have done this was Jeff.
The prosecution's theory was that Jeff killed his father in an argument over prom and then had to get rid of the surviving witnesses. The prosecutor took the jury through the timeline.
On Saturday, April 29th, the Pelly house was definitely buzzing. Many of the individuals going to the prom wanted to come by and show Bob their prom dress, their prom tux. His home was always open. He wanted to be someone the community could depend on, someone who could be trusted by his parishioners. So up until roughly 5 o'clock, there was a lot of traffic in and out of the home.
But the prosecution says by 5:30, no other visitors could get into the house.
The house was locked up as tight as a drum. It became very clear that the murders had to happen between, say, 5 and 5:20. The biggest thing was Jeff said he wasn't there.
Jeff told investigators he left before 5 o'clock, but witnesses testified they saw Jeff's car parked outside the Pelly home after that.
The witnesses who saw when the car was at the house and when the car left the home, he was clearly at the house.
Jeff's prom date also testified. She said when Jeff showed up at a nearby friend's house at 5:30, he wasn't wearing his tux.
The idea that he had to take the prom outfit down to his girlfriends and there was no pictures taken with his parents said a lot about what he had done in the house. He had to get out of there.
Jeff's prom date also recalled something Jeff told her at an amusement park the day after prom, shortly before news broke of the murders.
Jeff had seemed troubled. When she asked him what was the matter, Jeff had told her he thought something bad had happened at home. It seemed to come out of nowhere for this whole situation unless he knew something had happened back in Lakeville, Indiana.
Even though Jessie had not been home the weekend of the murders, she was also called to testify.
The day comes to where I have to testify, and I was very nervous because I knew I was going to see Jeff. And at this point, I did want to say something to him, that he took my whole family from me. He destroyed my life in one split second. As I sat on the stand and looked at him, he didn't even look at me. I did not get what I wanted. It's like he just pretended like I wasn't there.
I was always concerned that she would break down on the stand just because of the emotion involved in this. She did not. She stayed very, very solid the whole way.
Jessie testified she saw something important before leaving for that sleepover.
I let them know that when I said goodbye to my mom, that the gun rack was on the wall and there was a bow and a shotgun on it.
The bow was in the rack when officers came that Sunday morning because we had photographs of it, but the firearm was not there.
Police never found that gun, believed to be the murder weapon, but they were convinced they didn't need it. They testified Jeff made a seemingly damning statement in an untaped interview.
If I tell you what happened, would I get the death penalty? Who would say something about that unless they'd done something wrong?
There was no motive, there was no opportunity, there was no murder weapon, there was no case. From the very beginning, the police basically assumed that Jeff had committed this crime without any evidence. What they didn't investigate in the case was any possibility that someone else and for other reasons had committed these murders.
After calling more than 50 witnesses, prosecutors say all the facts point to Jeff Pelley.
It's preposterous to think that in the short amount of time that Jeff's presence was unaccounted for, somewhere around 20 to 30 minutes, he could have killed his family, disposed of the murder weapon, driven over to his date's house. There's no possible way that he could have done all of those things in the amount of time he had.
As the trial drew to a close, Jeff's fate and Jesse's sense of security were hanging in the balance.
There's no doubt in my mind that Jeff is innocent. He did not commit these murders. He's not a killer.
Do I think the evidence points to Jeff? Yes, I do.
The prosecutor started his closing argument, letting the jury know it was his burden to prove the case.
The prosecution had no murder weapon.
Did you have anything to do with it?
No, I didn't.
No confession, and no forensic evidence. The case the jury had to consider rested mainly on the timeline and Jeff Pelley's motive, his anger over prom.
Waiting for a verdict was very nerve-wracking.
But now the burden of deciding Jeff Pelley's fate is theirs.
I didn't know what was going to come out of this. I hoped he was going to be put in prison, but there was always that chance that that might not happen.
One of Pelley's lawyers says his client is under a lot of stress now that the jury has the case.
Jeff was facing life in prison, so everything was at stake.
The jury deliberated on this case. They went out, I believe it was a Wednesday afternoon, about 2 or 3 o'clock. Came back with a verdict, I believe it was after 8 o'clock on Friday night. The jury came back with guilty on all 4 counts against Jeff Pelley.
Guilty for the murders of Dawn, Bob, Janelle, and Jolene Pelley.
I felt a sense of justice when I heard the verdict was guilty. My family's killer was put away. Jeff does have a wife and a child, so I did feel for his son because he was losing a dad, and I know how that feels.
But I remember to this day, the image of Jeff being handcuffed is burned in my mind. Jurors were quoted as saying, well, if he didn't do it, who did? That is not proof beyond a reasonable doubt.
Jeff was sentenced to 160 years in prison for the 4 murders in this matter.
The case, however, was far from over.
So after the conviction, we of course filed an appeal, and we were successful. The convictions were set aside on a number of procedural grounds.
I actually had someone call me and tell me that, and I remember being at Save-A-Lot, actually, and I was sitting in my car. And I just started crying because I was afraid it was all going to start again. And I didn't want to have to look over my shoulder.
But Jeff remained in custody, and in February 2009, the Indiana Supreme Court upheld Jeff Pelley's conviction. The sentence stood. With the case seemingly behind her, Jessie decided her children were old enough to hear how she lost her family.
When I was first told about my mom's past, we were actually in Indiana. She took me to her sister's and mom and stepdad's graves. She told me that they had been killed when she was 9. It made me sad because I was like, well, that's your family, that's my family. I had never actually witnessed her cry like that.
So I would Google Pelley, Pelley murders, Jessica Pelley. You know, any 2 words that I could put together to figure out where she was. Well, I had found one clipping of one article that said Jessie Tourangeau. So I went on the search bar, typed in her name, boom, this eye came up. It was just this part of her eye. I knew it was her. I knew. Part of me was scared because I thought maybe she didn't want me in her life. But I said to myself, you know what? I've come this far. There's no stopping now. I don't know if you remember me or not. My name is Stephanie. We were close when we were younger. I'm just gonna write her a letter. I'm gonna tell her how I feel. I'm gonna tell her who I am. And if she wants me to be in her life, fine. If she doesn't, I will leave it to you to write me back. I will probably be biting my nails until you do.
So one day I log into Facebook and there's a message from Stephanie Fagan. Well, I don't recognize the name, but I click on it and I read it. I have huge tears in my eyes right now just knowing that you were actually gonna get my letter this time.
I just told her I've been looking for you my whole life. And I told her I took care of your parents' graves and I've thought about you and I've talked to you in my sleep. I've talked to you when I wake up. I've gone through my life and never lost sight of finding you.
I never in a million years thought I'd ever see you again. And I'm bawling as I'm reading it. I'm just crying hysterically. And the feeling I got was someone reached out to me and has been looking for me this whole time and wants to get to know me again and wants to be around me and remembers everything.
And at first she didn't remember me, but then I started kind of telling her stories about camp and it clicked immediately.
I have missed you for many years. Much love, Stephanie.
And the rest is kind of history. Again, there we go.
Stephanie and I call each other sisters. From the moment that we reconnected, we bonded in such a way that I've never had a bond like that.
Jesse's cousin, Jamie Collins, also came back into her life.
Reuniting with Jessie, she was this fierce, vibrant, kind of bold, free-spirited person with this hot pink hair. She had told me a lot of her deepest, darkest secrets about her past and her thoughts and her fears and her dreams. And we talked about so many things that in a lot of ways I felt like I knew her better than maybe I've ever known anyone.
So Jamie said to me, you know, you should write a book about your life. And I told her, I said, well, everybody tells me that, but I definitely could never do that. And I probably couldn't talk to a stranger about everything. And she said, well, what about me? Could you tell me? And I told her, yeah, I could probably do that.
Though she came across as outgoing and positive, the trauma of Jesse's childhood was never far below the surface.
We were actually writing the book at the time that Jessica kind of had a downward spiral. And it was a very scary time for both of us. She lost a close family friend to cystic fibrosis. And for her, it had triggered these elements from her past. Once the triggers hit her, that was it.
I hadn't lost anybody since my family, and I never realized that it would hit me like that. So I have a whole week where I don't remember a whole lot. I trashed my living room. I was angry. It was like I wasn't even there. I could feel myself being sucked into the darkness, and I just couldn't bring myself out.
That week, I knew something was going on. I got a call, and she was crying. All I could hear was, you know, I need you. I was like, okay, you need to calm down. There was no calming her down. I was like, maybe you just need to take an anxiety pill. You know, maybe you just need to calm down. She's like, I took all of them. I said, oh, this is not good. And the phone went silent. And I couldn't hear her anymore. And I thought, that's it. This whole time, I waited for her and I looked for her, and now this is it. This is it. She's gone.
That week when she was spiraling, the last thing I remember was an ambulance at our house, and I was watching them take my mom out on a stretcher.
I ended up waking up in a hospital, and I didn't know how I got there. I didn't know what had happened, but the doctor asked me if I tried to kill myself, and I was floored. I guess I had taken a bottle of pills and tried to kill myself. I later found in a notebook a goodbye note.
At that point in time, that was rock bottom for her. She called me. I was one of the only people that knew. She said, I'm done. I gotta get help.
I was scared for my life that I wasn't gonna make it. And I did not come this far not to make it. So I ended up admitting myself in the hospital and started getting some help. I've learned that I do have DID, which is dissociative identity disorder, and I am part Jessica and part Jessie. So when I pushed Jessica down inside me, way down, and didn't want to feel sad, lonely, I think I lost a lot of the memories that I had in doing that. And now that I'm trying to get them back, you know, it's difficult too, because I'm just now letting Jessica come back. A survivor's path is very messy. There is no clean line. There is no straight path. You have your ups and downs, but when you get help, it's a little bit easier. I do not consider myself fully healed, but I am definitely on the way to recovery. When I think of Jessica, I don't think of just a lonely, scared little girl anymore. I realize she is me, and together, we can overcome anything.
Anything, including a recent development in her stepbrother's case. It's still winding its way through the courts. Jeff Pelly's new legal team has filed a motion for post-conviction relief.
30 years later, there's still a legal process going on. It really is a form of slow torture, but I fully believe that he's not getting out.
Jessie is trying not to dwell on it, and instead focusing on helping others. I Am Jessica, the book she wrote with her cousin Jamie, was published on April 29, 2019, the 30-year anniversary of the murders.
We've had a few book signing events, and it's been amazing just to see kind of the outpouring of support from the community.
I just appreciate everybody that's been supportive and has hung in there with me.
It's been really an overwhelmingly positive experience for both of us.
When I read the book, it made me realize how strong I am, and it made me realize that I have a purpose, and it is to help people, and this book is one way that I'm going to do that.
There's a lot I admire about Jessie. I admire Jessie for her strong will. I admire her for her strength. I admire her for everything that she went through.
There you go.
And I feel like she came out just this beautiful flower in a field full of weeds. That's how I feel about her.
What am I doing with this lemon?
I saw her in this downward spiral, and then in just the past year or so, I've seen her crawl back up. She survived it. Seeing my mom go through this has taught me to value family and to never give up and to always keep fighting no matter what's going on in my life.
You better eat your salad. Having my family today is a blessing. I look at them and I just realize how lucky I am to be alive.
30 years later, Jessie has regained the sense of family she lost so suddenly, but she still thinks of what life would be like had things turned out differently.
Now that I'm starting to feel again, I do think about my sisters and what they would have been like, and if I would have had any nieces and nephews from them. And my mom, you know, how would she be with my kids? Would they have called her grandma? Would they have called her Nana? I think today my mom is looking down and she's proud of me. I know they're not here, but I know they're with me, and I still think of them. I remember singing with my sisters right up there on that stage. We would sing Amazing Grace. 30 years ago, I did not know Amazing Grace would apply to me. I know now that I survived for a reason. I once was lost, now I'm found. I really was lost for a long time, and now I'm not anymore.